The Man of Law's Tale. Introduction to The Man of Law's Tale. Our host perceived the sun upon its arc, of artificial day from dawn to dark, quarter way up plus half an hour or more, and though not deeply versed in heavenly lore, he knew quite well it was the 18th day of April, that is messenger to May, and was aware the shadow of every tree was of the same extent and quantity as the erected body casting it. So, by the shadow cast, he had the wit to judge that Phoebus, shining clear and bright, had climbed some 45 degrees in height. So for that day, and in these latitudes, it must be 10 o'clock, our host concludes. And suddenly he plucked his horse about. "My lords," he said, "I would inform the rout, a quarter of the day's already gone. Now, for the love of God, and by St. John, let us no longer waste the time, I say. My lords, time wastes itself by night and day, steals from us secretly, sleep or waking, if we are negligent, for time is making stealthy escape, a stream that never again turns to the hills, but glides on to the plain. Seneca and philosophers of old bewail time's loss more than the loss of gold. Lost money is not lost beyond recall, but loss of time brings on the loss of all. It can return to us again, once sped, no more than can poor Molly's maidenhead, when she has lost it in her wantonness. Let us not moulder here in idleness. You, sir, the man of law, since you contracted to tell a tale, that tale is now exacted. You all submitted, your consent was free, to put this case for judgment up to me. Acquit yourself. You promised so for one, and then at least your duty will be done. Host, he replied, I'm willing, make no doubt. I never had a thought of backing out. Promise is debt, and as I am your debtor, I'd like to keep my word. I can't say better. Laws are for all, and he who seeks to lay them on others should by rights himself obey them. Our text demands it, but I make a vow. I can't recall a pithy tale just now, but Chaucer, clumsy as he is at times, in metre and the cunning use of rhymes, has told them in such English, I suppose, as he commands, for everybody knows, that, if he has not told them, my dear brother, in one book he has told them in another. He has told more of lovers up and down than even Ovid honoured with renown. In his epistles, which are very old, why tell them all again, since they've been told? In youth he wrote of sea and halcyon, and since has celebrated everyone, of all these noble women and their lovers, as who will seek his lengthy book discovers. The work is called The Legend of Cupid's Saints, and there you may perceive how Chaucer paints Lucrece and her wide wounds, and Thisbe gored in Babylon, and Dido's faithful sword, because of false Aeneas, or may view the fate of Phyllis that was hapless too, turned to a tree for love of Demophoon. There you may also listen to the moan of Deianira and Hermione, or Ariadne and Hypsipyle. The barren island in the foaming sound is there to see, and brave Leander drowned for heroes' love. And you may count the woes of Briseis, or see the tear that flows, Helen, from thee and thee, Laodamia. There too the cruelty of Queen Medea, her little children hanging by the neck, when the false Jason turned her love to wreck. O Hypermnestra, true Penelope, faithful Alcestis, how he praises thee. But certainly he never writes a word of Canis. That tale should not be heard. She loved her brother in a sinful way. Fie on such cursed tales as that, I say. Nor draws from Apollonius, hymn of Tyre, how King Antiochus, in mad desire, bereft his daughter of her maidenhead. The tale's too horrible, it can't be read. He flung her on the pavement for his wooing, but Chaucer knew quite well what he was doing. and would not soil his sermons with narration of such unnatural abomination. No more will I, ignore them if we may. What shall I do then for a tale today? I'd rather not be likened, if you please, to those old muses called Pierides. The Metamorphoses know what I mean. Nevertheless, I do not care a bean, though I plod on behind him somewhat dim. I speak plain prose and leave the rhymes to him, and on the word, in sober-faced relation, as you shall hear, he started this narration. The Man of Law's Prologue. O hateful grief to suffer indigence, by hunger, thirst, and cold to be confounded, to feel heart's shame at asking a few pence, or, asking none, to know yourself surrounded by such necessity your need is sounded in every ear, and you are left to creep about and borrow, beg or steal your keep. You lay the blame on Christ, and bitterly reproach him for misdealing wealth. The whole, your neighbour, has sets you at enmity. You say, I have so little, he has all. By God, you say, a judgment's sure to fall upon him. He will feel the burning coals under his tail for scanting us poor souls. Then listen to the opinion of the wise. Better to die than live in indigence, such as your next-door neighbours will despise. If you be poor, farewell to eminence. Yet, from the wise, take this for common sense, that to the poor all times are out of joint. Therefore beware of reaching such a point. If you are poor, your very brother hates you, and all your friends avoid you, sad to say. O you rich merchantmen, how fortune fates you. Noble and prudent folk, you've won the day. You throw no double aces when you play, but fives and sixes, yours is the main chance, and Christmas time, for you's a time to dance. You scour land and sea to fill your purses, and, like sagacious men, you bargain for the fall and rise of kingdoms. You are sources of information, news of peace and war. But for a merchant I should have no store of tales to tell you now, yet one I know, told to me by a merchant long ago. The Man of Law's Tale. Part 1. In Syria once there dwelt a company of wealthy merchants, serious, straight and wise, that had a far-flung trade in spicery, and cloth of gold and satins of rich dyes, all serviceable stuff that could surprise with novelty, and business was a pleasure, dealing with them and bartering for their treasure. It happened that some merchants of this sort made up their minds to venture out to Rome, whether for business dealings or for sport, nor were they satisfied to stay at home and send a messenger, but crossed the foam in person thither, and where their expectation of profit lay, they found accommodation, and having made a sojourn in that town, at their good pleasure for a month or more, it happened that the excellent renown of Constance, daughter of the emperor, reached them with every detail answered for, and fresh particulars from day to day came to these Syrians, as I shall say. This was the common voice of every man. Our emperor, God save his majesty, has such a daughter since the world began. There never was another such as she. For beauty and for goodness, she could be the Queen of Europe with all eyes upon her. May God sustain her long in health and honour, peerless in beauty, yet untouched by pride, young, but untainted by frivolity. In all her dealings goodness is her guide, and humbleness has vanquished tyranny. She is the mirror of all courtesy, her heart the very chamber of holiness, her hand the minister to all distress. All this was true, as God himself is true. But to our purpose, when their ships were laden, these Syrian merchants started off anew. For Syria, having seen this blissful maiden, happy in this as in the goods they trade in, pursued their business as they did before, and lived contented, I can say no more. It happened that these merchants stood in grace with the young Syrian Sultan their return from Rome or any other foreign place. He met with a benevolent concern and entertained them eagerly to learn the news from other kingdoms, any word. They had to tell of wonders seen and heard, and, among other things, they made report of Lady Constance, and with special mention of her nobility in such a sort as to entrap the Sultan's pleased attention. Her features filled his fancy and invention, till all the passion of his heart was cast on loving her as long as life should last. In that large book that overhangs the earth, and people call the heavens, it well may be that it was written in his stars at birth, love was to be his death. For certainly the death of every man is there to see, patterned in stars clearer than in a glass, could one but read how all will come to pass. For in the stars, and many years before his birth, the death of proud Achilles stood, Hector's and Pompey's, Caesar's too, the war of Thebes, shorn Samson's death, the hardihood of Hercules and Socrates the good, and Turnus murdered, all was written plain. Man cannot read it, he is dull of brain. And thus it was the Sultan, to be brief, summoned the privy council of his land, and said that of his purposes the chief was to obtain the Lady Constance's hand, and that at once, for they must understand that he must perish, lacking her for wife. Let them take thought in haste to save his life. Various counsellors said various things. They argued and conjectured in profusion. They brought forth many subtle reasonings, and spoke of charms and magical illusion, but finally were drawn to the conclusion there was no knowing how to save his life, except by taking Constance for his wife. They saw great difficulties in the case, reasoning thus to make their feelings plain, that there were such discrepancies to face between their laws and customs, it was vain to ask a Christian prince to entertain thoughts of alliance under the dispensation Mahomet blessedly had given their nation. And he replied, rather than that I lose the Lady Constance, I will be baptized. I must be hers. In this I cannot choose. O leave your arguments and be advised. Can you not see my life is jeopardized? I have a sickness she alone can cure. It is a grief I cannot long endure. What need is there for further dilatation? I say by treaties and by embassy, and by the Holy Father's mediation, backed by the Church and the nobility, to work destruction on Mahometry, and to enlarge the blessed law of Christ. All were agreed, the arguments sufficed. The Sultan with his peers in all their pride, and all his lieges were to undergo their christening. Constance was to be his bride, and certain gold, how much I do not know, determined for the party to bestow. In surety, oaths were sworn on either side. Fair Constance, God Almighty be your guide. Now some of you expect, if I may guess, that I should tell you all the preparation made by the Emperor in his nobleness for Lady Constance at the celebration, but you must know that the elaboration ordained for an occasion such as this cannot be told in a parenthesis, for bishops were appointed to attend, ladies and lords and knights of high renown, and many others. Let me make an end. And all were notified throughout the town to pray with great devotion, calling down Christ's blessing on the match, and to implore a prosperous journey to the Syrian shore. At last the day of her departure came. I say, there came that day of fatal woe. No longer might she tarry or exclaim, for each and all were ready decked to go. pale Constance rose in sorrow, for the glow of colour left her cheek as she prepared her, knowing too well that nothing would be spared her. Alas, what wonder is it if she wept at being sent into a stranger nation, and parted from the friends that long had kept her tenderly to suffer subjugation, to one she scarcely knew by reputation? All husbands are good husbands, heretofore. Wives have established this, I say no more. She said in tears, O father, your poor girl, your Constance, softly fostered in your love, and O beloved mother, crown and pearl of all my joy, save only Christ above, to your kind graces, she that was your dove, commends herself, and journeys to the shore of Syria, and shall never see you more. Alas, alas, forth to a barbarous nation, at once to go, but since it is your will, may Jesus Christ, that died for our salvation, give me the strength of purpose to fulfill his wishes, wretched girl, to fare so ill. And yet what matter? Woman is a thrall, disposed and ruled over by men in all. No, not in Troy, when Pyrrhus broke the wall, and burnt down Ilium, nor in Thebes destroyed, nor yet in Rome when it was ripe to fall. To conquering Hannibal that had thrice enjoyed, the victory was grief so unalloyed, as in her chamber when she made to go. But go she must, whether she wept or no. First cause of motion, cruel firmament, driving the stars with thy diurnal sway, and hurling all from east to occident, that naturally would take another way. Thy crowding force set heaven in such array, that this, her first fierce journey, must miscarry, and Mars will slay this marriage, if she marry. Although unfortunate oblique degree of the ecliptic, whence the cadent Mars, thrust from his proper angle, helplessly, falls into Scorpio, darkest house of stars. O Lord of war, whose influence debars all hope, O feeble Luna, vainly knit, to him thrust forth from where thou shouldest sit, and O imprudent Emperor of Rome, is one time like another in such case? Hadst thou no astrologer at home, to choose the favourable time and place for journeying, for one of such high race, whose hour of birth was known to thee? But oh, we are, alas, too ignorant or too slow. With solemn ceremonial, as was due, the ship for this poor maid was brought to shore. She only said, Christ Jesus be with you, and they, farewell, fair Constance, nothing more. How resolute a countenance she bore! Forth in this manner, then I let her sail, and turned to other matters in my tale. The Sultan's mother was a well of vices. She saw the course on which her son was bent, of giving up their ancient sacrifices, and so for certain counsellors she sent, who came to be apprised of her intent. And when these men of mark were gathered near, she took her seat and said, as you shall hear, My lords, she said, you know it to a man, how that my son is purposed to abjure the holy teaching of our Alcoran, and all Mahomet had from God the pure. And to that God I here make promise sure, rather to die the death than to depart from what that faith has written in my heart. What could befall us from this newer law, but thraldom of our bodies and remorse? For to deny Mahomet can but draw our souls through everlasting hell perforce. But, my good lords, will you pursue a course I shall suggest and further my endeavour, one that will surely make us safe forever? They all assented, swearing to make good their oath to live and die with her, and stand in strength behind her, each as best he could, engaged to rally all his friends at hand. This was the enterprise that she had planned. I shall describe it to you if I may, and thus, addressing them, went on to say, We first must make pretence to be baptized, cold water cannot hurt us very much, and I shall have a banquet organised to pay the Sultan out if he should touch, though christened white, his wife and many such. Shall find there's blood to wash away, she'll want more water than it takes to fill a font. O Sultaness, root of iniquity, virago, second Queen Semiramis, O serpent masked in femininity, the serpent bound in hell was like to this pretended woman that can wreck the bliss of innocence and virtue through the spite, bred in thy devil's nest of foul delight. O Satan, ever envious since the day on which they chased you out of paradise, our heritage, how soon you found the way. Through Eve to woman, our bondage is the price. And now, this Christian match, by your advice, shall be undone. Of woman you have made the instrument by which we are betrayed. This Sultaness, on whom my imprecation, having dismissed her court in secrecy, why spin things out into a long narration, rode round to see the Sultan presently, and told him she'd renounce Mahometry and be baptized in Christ. She had been wrong, she said, to be a heathen for so long, and after that she begged him for the honour of feasting him upon the wedding day. The Christians too, she'd take the work upon her, to please them all. He answered, as you say, and knelt to thank her, having got her way. She kissed her son, and he, with gladdened heart, in speechless joy allowed her to depart. Part 2. The company of Christians reached the coast of Syria, a great and solemn route. Immediately the Sultan sent a post, first to his mother, then to all about, to say his wife had come beyond a doubt, and beg her to take horse to meet his bride, and do her honour for his kingdom's pride. Great was the throng, and splendid the array of Syrians and Romans in their meeting. The mother of the Sultan, rich and gay, received his lady with as fond a greeting as any mother would have shown in treating a well-beloved daughter. So they ride solemnly to the city, side by side, not Caesar threading a triumphal arch, whom Lucan celebrates with such a boast. Was royaler than this exotic march at the assembly of this blissful host? But yet this Scorpion at her wicked post, the Sultaness, for all her flattering, gathered herself most mortally to sting. The Sultan came himself a little after, so royal he was wonderful to see, and welcomed her with joy and happy laughter. And in this merriment I let them be. The fruit of it is what you'll get from me. After a time they thought it for the best to end their revelries and take their rest. The day appointed came, the Sultaness, old Harridan, fixed the feast of which I told. Thither the host of Christian people press, in general assembly, young and old. What a display there was of kingly gold! What dainties in the dishes! As for those, they bought them all too dear before they rose. O sudden grief, that ever art near neighbour to worldly bliss, sprinkled with bitterness, the ends of joy in all our earthly labour. Grief occupies the goal to which we press. For your own safety think it is no less, and in your day of gladness bear in mind the unknown evil forging on behind. Briefly, to tell my story as is fitting, Sultan and Christians all were overthrown, hacked into pieces, stabbed where they were sitting, all but the Lady Constance spared alone. The ancient Sultaness, a cursed crone, helped by her friends, did all as she had planned, being resolved herself to rule the land. For not a single one of those converted, not one of them that knew the Sultan's mind, but he was hewn in pieces ere alerted, and Constance, as the Sultaness had designed, was hurried hot-foot off and was confined in an old rudderless vessel and told to learn her way to Italy and so return. She had some store of treasure, let me add, for sake of truth, and full supplies of food were given her with such garments as she had, and forth she sailed the ocean salt and rude. O Constance, full of sweet solicitude, O emperor's daughter of a mighty realm, he that is lord of fortune guide thy helm. She crossed herself, and with a piteous falter of voice addressed the cross of Christ and said, Holiest cross, O rich and shining altar, bright with the blood of pity the Lamb bled, to wash the world's iniquity, O shed protection from the fiend upon me, keep my soul the day I drown upon the deep. Victorious tree, protection of the true, thou that wert only worthy to uprear, the King of heaven in his wounds all knew, that whitest lamb, hurt with the cruel spear, O blessed cross, that puts the fiend in fear, of man or woman that is signed with thee, help me amend my life, and succour me, for many a year and day this creature fled upon the Grecian seas, and reached the strait, beyond Morocco, so her fortunes led. Many a time in grief she must abate her sorry meals, expecting death, and wait till in the raging waves her vessel reach what shore soever in the end, and beach. It might be questioned why she was not slain. Who at that banquet could protect or save? To that demand I answer back again, who succoured Daniel in the horrible cave, when everyone but he, master and slave, fell to the lions and was torn apart? No one but God, whom Daniel bore in heart. God, to proclaim the wonders of his arm, by miracle through her, would have it so, and Christ, who is the honey to all harm, has chosen instruments, as well we know, to work his purposes that darkly show. To human ignorance, our feeble sense grasps not the prudence of his providence. And if not murdered at the feast, what law kept Constance then from drowning in the sea? And who kept Jonah in the fish's maw, till he was spouted up at Nineveh? It was none other, certainly, than he. Who kept the Hebrew folk from being drowned, crossing the sea dry-footed, safe and sound? And who commanded the tempestuous mouth of the four winds that trouble land and sea, saying, O west and east, O north and south, touch with no trouble ocean, land, or tree. There is no such commander, if not he, that walked the water. He it was who kept this woman safe, awake, or when she slept. Where then? For some 3 years upon the wave, got she her food and drink? And who sufficed to Mary the Egyptian in a cave, and fed her there? Certainly none but Christ. 5 loaves, and 2 small fishes overpriced, the needs of the 5,000. So indeed, God's foison came to Constance in her need. Forth over ocean then she drove and came, safe through our stormy channel, till at last, under a castle that I cannot name, far in Northumberland, the billows cast her vessel on the sands and held it fast, from ebb of tide to the returning crest. There, by the will of Christ, she came to rest. This castle had a constable in chief, who came to see the wreck, and, as he ought, he searched it through, and found in all her grief this woman and the treasure she had brought. Him, in her foreign language, she besought for mercy, begging him to take her life, and so deliver her from earthly strife. Latin she spoke, of a degenerate kind, but all the same she made him understand, and he, assured there was no more to find, upon the vessel brought her safe to land. She knelt to thank him, seeing in him God's hand, but who she was, she would not utter breath, for hope of favour or the fear of death. She said the seas had blotted out her life, and she in truth had lost her memory. The constable, together with his wife, moved to compassion, wept in sympathy, and Constance, showed such sweet alacrity to serve and please all people in that place. They loved her that, but looked upon her face. This constable and Hermangild, his wife, were pagans like their neighbours everywhere. Hermangild came to love her as her life, and Constance made so long a sojourn there, giving herself to weeping and to prayer, that Jesus brought conversion of his grace to Hermangild, the lady of the place. In all that land no Christians dared to meet. For worship most had fled, for long before a pagan army and a pagan fleet had made their conquest of this northern shore. To Wales had therefore fled a Christian corps of ancient Britons dwelling in our isle. That was the refuge of the faith meanwhile. Not wholly so, for there were some believed and honoured Christ apart in secrecy, so that their pagan rulers were deceived. There happened, near the castle, to be three, one among whom was blind and could not see, save with that inward eyesight of the mind, that still can shed its light upon the blind. Bright was the sun when, on a summer's day, the constable suggested they might go, he, Constance, and his wife, along the way, towards the sea for 1/2 mile or so, just for the pleasure of roaming to and fro. And on their walk it chanced they met at last, this old and crooked man with eyes shut fast. The old blind Briton cried, "For Jesus' sake, my lady Hermangild, restore my sight." Now she, on hearing him, began to quake, for fear her husband, should it come to light, she was of Christ, would have her slain outright. But Constance made her bold, bidding her search and do Christ's will as daughter of his church. The constable, abashed at what he saw, said, "What's all this about?" and stopped to stare. And Constance answered, "Sir, the power and law of Christ can save us from the devil's snare." Then she began so fully to declare our faith that what she said to him sufficed, ere evening fell to turn his heart to Christ. This constable was not the overlord, where Constance had been found upon the strand, but long had held the region with his sword. For Allah, king of all Northumberland, he was a wise king with a powerful hand. Against the Scots, as everybody knows, let me turn back to how my story goes. Now, Satan, who is ever on our track, to trick us, seeing Constance's perfection and casting round how he might pay her back, filled a young knight who lived in that direction with foul desires of such a fierce complexion, the fellow thought he'd die, so sharp the spur of lust, unless he had his will of her. He wooed her fiercely, it availed him naught, for she would yield to sin for no persuasion. So, out of spite, he compassed in his thought a shameful death for her by some evasion, or stratagem, and when on some occasion the constable was absent, in he crept, softly one night where Hermangilda slept. Weary with prayer and holy meditation, she lay near Constance. Little did she note how he, o'ermastered by the fiend's temptation, had softly come upon her. Then he smote the lady Hermangild and slit her throat. Then, laying the bloody knife beside the bed, of Constance went his way. God strike him dead! Next day the constable returned again, with Allah too, king of the country round, to find his wife was pitilessly slain. Wringing his hands, he wept and fell to ground. And there, by Constance in the bed, he found the bloody knife. Alas, what could she say? Out of her wits with terror and dismay, they told the king of the unhappy deed, and also of the manner, time, and place in which they came on Constance in her need. Upon the ship, and brooding on the case, he felt a shock of pity in her face. He saw benignity. Could such a glance in one so lovely fall to such mischance? And so, As when a lamb is brought to slaughter, she stood, this innocent, before the king, and the false knight, the villain that had sought her. Destruction swore that she had done the thing. The rest stood weeping by, and clamouring that it was unimaginable she had done so monstrous an iniquity, for they had ever known her virtuous, and loving to her mistress Hermengild, and the whole household gave its witness thus, except the knight by whom she had been killed. Much moved by this, the gentle king was filled with a desire for stronger proof, to hit by deeper questioning the truth of it. Alas, my Constance, champion hast thou none, nor canst defend thyself. What wilt thou say? But he that died for our redemption, Son of God, who bound the fiend, and where he lay, there lies he still, shall champion thee this day. Without an open miracle from on high, to save her she assuredly must die. She fell upon her knees, and thus she prayed, Immortal God, thou who didst save Susanna, falsely accused, and thou, merciful maid, and Mother Mary, daughter of Saint Anna, before whose child the angels sing Hosanna, if I be innocent of this felony, let me not die, support and succour me. Have you not some time seen the paler face, among a crowd, of one that has been led towards his death, having obtained no grace, with such a colour in his face, so dead, as to be singled out, beset by dread, among all other faces in that rout? So also Constance stood and gazed about. O queens, abiding in prosperity, you duchesses and ladies, hearts of stone, would have compassion on her misery. An emperor's daughter, there she stands, alone, without a soul to whom she can make moan. O royal blood, standing in greatest need, and deadly fear, far are thy friends indeed. King Allah felt compassion for her fears. Fine hearts feel pity quickly at a look, and was unable to restrain his tears. At last he said, Let someone fetch a book, and if this knight will swear an oath she took the knife and killed this woman, we shall confer and name a man for executioner. They brought a British book in which were written the Gospels, and the knight stood forth alone, and swore her guilt, and lo, the knight was smitten. A hand appeared and struck him to the bone. Behind the neck and down he went like stone, his eyes burst from their sockets in his face, in sight of all assembled in the place, and as he fell a voice was heard to ring, Thou hast defamed the innocent and meek, a daughter of the church, before the king. Thus hast thou done, and yet I did not speak. Aghast at such a marvel, faces seek each other in amaze at the unknown, dreading a judgment, all but hers alone. Great was their fear, and great their penitence, for having made a wrongful accusation, and felt suspicion of her innocence. And in the end, the heavenly visitation, with all that Constance spoke in mediation, converted Allah. Many in that place were also turned to Christ. O blessed grace! The treacherous knight was slain for his untruth. By Allah's doom there was no tarrying, though Constance felt deep pity for his youth. Then Jesus in his mercy caused the king to wed this holy maiden, Belfry's ring, in solemn joy, and Constance the serene, by ordinance of Christ is made a queen. Who grieved at this? Who was it took no part in this rejoicing? Who but Donegild, the mother of the king? Her tyrant heart felt it would burst in two, for she was filled with raging spite at what her son had willed. She thought it gross dishonour to his state to take this foreign creature for his mate. I do not choose to stuff with chaff and straw my lengthy tale, I rather seek the corn. Why then relate the majesty and awe Of course, on course upon the marriage morn, who blew upon a trumpet or a horn? But let me pluck the fruit out of my story. They ate, danced, drank, they sang, and were in glory. They went to bed, as reason was and right. For wives, albeit very holy things, are bound to suffer patiently at night such necessary pleasures as the king's, or others who have wedded them with rings. Her holiness, well, she must do without it, just for a little, and that's all about it. He got a boy upon her then and there, and to the constable and a bishop too, entrusted Constance, being forced to fare once more to Scotland. There was work to do against his enemies. Constance, mild and true, and humble, heavy with her child, lay still, within her chamber, waiting on Christ's will. Time came to fullness, and she bore a boy. Maurice they christened him. In great content, the constable chose a man in his employ, and wrote the king a letter to be sent by him with tidings of this glad event, and other news that brooked of no delay. The envoy took the letter and went his way. This man, upon a private calculation, rode quickly to the mother of the king, and proffered her a courteous salutation. In his own tongue, Madam, rejoice, I bring you news enough to make the heavens ring 100,000 times in thankful joy. The queen has been delivered of a boy. Look, here are the sealed letters with the news, which I must bear with all the speed I can, to greet your son the king, and should you choose, to write to him, I am your serving man. Not at the moment, Donegild began. Stay here until tomorrow, take your rest. And added, then I'll say as I think best. The messenger drank deep of ale and wine, and all the letters secretly were cheated. Out of his box he slept there like a swine. Another letter then was counterfeited, but with the utmost skill, and when completed, directed to King Allah to appear. As from the constable, as you shall hear. The letter said the queen had been delivered, but of some horrible fiend or creature lured from hell itself, and that the castle shivered. At sight of it, it could not be endured. Its mother was an elf, they were assured, a wandering witch of charms and sorcery. None could abide her hateful company. Great was King Allah's grief at what he read. He spoke to no one of the woes he bore, but wrote again in his own hand and said, Welcome the word of Christ for evermore. To me, that now am learned in his law. Lord, welcome be thy pleasure and thy will. All mine I place at thy commandment still. Preserve this infant, be it foul or fair, until I come, and let my wife be nursed. Christ, when he wills, can bless me with an heir, one that can please me better than the first. And sealing this in private, his tears burst forth from his eyes. The messenger went away, bearing the letter. There's no more to say. O messenger, sodden in drunkenness, strong is your breath, your limbs are all astray. You blab the secrets that you should repress. Your mind is gone, you chatter like a jay. Your features are distorted, turned to clay. Wherever there is drunkenness about, no secret can be hidden, make no doubt. O Donegild, I have no English worthy, tyrant of thy malignity and spying, and therefore to the devil I refer thee. Let him make poems on your treacherous prying. You man-shaped monster! No, by God, I'm lying! You are a very fiend, and I can tell, wherever you are, your spirit is in hell. The envoy left the king and once again reached the Queen Mother's court to pass the night, and Donegild was quick to entertain the man as hospitably as she might. He underpinned his girdle pretty tight, boozing away, and snored with gummy eyes all night until the sun began to rise. Again they stole his letters, and the pith of what they forged instead of them was now. King Allah bids the constable forthwith, on pain of hanging and the royal vow, for no consideration to allow, Constance within his kingdom, let her bide no longer than 3 days and half a tide. Into the very ship in which he found her, let her be put, and so thrust out to sea, her and her son, with all her gear around her, and charge her never to return to me. O Constance, tremble at the harsh decree. What dreams will haunt your troubled sleeping, filled with dread? All this was planned by Donegild. On the next morning, when the day was full, the envoy woke and took the shortest way towards the castle to the constable. He gave the letter, who in great dismay cried out repeatedly, Alas, the day! Lord Jesus Christ, how can the world go on with such a mort of wickedness thereon? O mighty God, and can it be thy will? Thou art a righteous judge. How can it be that thou shouldst suffer innocence to spill and leave the wicked in prosperity? Ah, kindest Constance, oh the grief to me, to be thy executioner, or pay it with my life. There is no other way. They wept, both young and old, throughout the place, at this accursed command the king had sent, and Constance, with a pale and deadly face, arose the 4th day after. Down she went, towards the ship, fully obedient to the will of Christ, and kneeling on the shore, said, Welcome, Lord, thy word for evermore. He that protected me from unjust blame, when first I came among you, will allow no shame or harm, will shield me just the same. In the salt sea, although I know not how, as strong as ever he was, so is he now. In him I trust, and in his mother dear, my rudder and my sail. What need I fear? Her little child lay weeping in her arm, and kneeling with him pityingly, she said, Peace, little son, I will not do you harm. And then she took a kerchief from her head, and laid it on his little eyes instead. She rocked him in her arms and lulled his cries, and up to heaven's height she cast her eyes. Mary, she said, O maid and mother bright, truth is that by a woman's egging on, mankind was lost, condemned to death and night, for which thy son was rent and spit upon. Thou sawest his torment. What comparison can ever be between thy sufferings there, and any other woe that man can bear? Thy child thou sawest slain before thine eyes. My little child lives still and seeks thy aid. Thou to whom every woeful spirit cries, Bright lady, glory of womanhood, fair maid, haven of refuge, star that cannot fade, have pity on my child. Thy gentleness pities all sorrowful creatures in distress. O little child, alas, what is thy guilt? That never sinned as yet, and couldst not do? Why would thy hard heart father have thee spilt? O constable, is there no mercy in you? Keep my sweet child, oh, must he suffer too? Let him but stay, or if you fear the blame, kiss him but once, and in his father's name. And then she turned her gaze towards the land, and cried aloud, Hard husband, ah, goodbye! And she arose and went along the strand, towards the vessel, and the crowd drew nigh, and still she begged her baby not to cry, and took her leave, and with a holy heart, crossing herself, made ready to depart. The ship was victualled well enough, indeed, abundantly for her in such a case, with necessaries to supply her need. Sufficiently, thank God for all his grace. May he send light to shine upon her face, and waft her home. What better can I say? Over the open sea she drove her way. Part 3. Allah the king came home, his warfare done, and reached the castle, that of which I told, and asked at once to see his wife and son. The constable, who felt his heart turn cold, began to tell him plainly and unfold. What you have heard, I cannot tell it better, ending by showing him his seal and letter, saying, My lord, as you commanded me, on pain of death, I did, no less than that. The messenger was tortured until he acknowledged all, confessing full and flat, where he had been, what places rested at, by night and how, and so, by questioning, they guessed the author of this dreadful thing. The hand was recognized that wrote the letter and mixed the venom for this cursed deed, but how I know not, I can say no better, than that the outcome was the king decreed. His mother should be killed, as you may read, for false allegiance, treason and dishonour. Thus ends old Donegild, my curse upon her. The sorrows of King Alla night and day consumed him for his wife and little child. How great his sufferings were, no tongue can say. And so I turned to Constance on the wild paths of the sea, 5 years and more exiled, in grief and misery, but in the hand of Christ's protecting angel, she neared land. Yes, by a heathen castle at long last. What name it had, alas, I cannot find. In my authorities, the sea upcast, her and the child. O Saviour of mankind, think upon Constance, have her child in mind. She's fallen among heathens dwelling near, on point of perishing, as you shall hear. Down from the castle, keep to see the sight, and stare at Constance many people came, and from the castle also late that night, there came its steward, heaven send him shame. He was a thief that had renounced the name of Christ. He climbed the vessel and made show to lie with her, whether she would or no. The wretched woman, overcome with grief, cried out for mercy, and her baby wept. But Blessed Mary saved her from the thief. For in the struggle, as the fellow leapt, in deadly grapple with her, he was swept over the side into the sea and drowned. And thus Christ kept her spotless, safe and sound. Foul lust of lechery, behold thy due. Not only dost thou darken a man's mind, but bringst destruction on his body too. In their beginning, all thy works are blind, and in their end are grief. How many find that not the act alone, but even the will to set about it can deprave and kill? How could this feeble woman have the strength against this scoundrel? Can you answer that? Goliath, of immeasurable length. How was it David came and knocked you flat? So young and so unarmed and such a sprat? How dared he look upon your dreadful face? Only one well can see by heaven's grace. And who gave Judith heart and hardiness to slay King Holofernes in his tent, and to deliver out of their distress the people of the Lord? My argument is this, that just as God Almighty sent a spirit of vigour to them in their woe, he could send strength to Constance, even so. Onwards her vessel through the narrow mouth of Ceuta and Gibraltar forged her way, sometimes to westward, sometimes north and south, and sometimes east for many a weary day, until Christ's mother, blessed be she, out of her endless goodness, to befriend poor Constance in her sorrow, made an end. Now we turn to the Emperor of Rome, and say no more of Constance for a while. From Syria the news had been brought home, about the Christians slaughtered, and the vile dishonour to his daughter by the guile of that foul sultaness, accursed beast, that had them murdered at the wedding feast. To take his vengeance then the emperor chose a senator and many another lord, all royally appointed, and God knows they took revenge upon that Syrian horde. They smote and burnt and put them to the sword. For many a day then, to be brief, turned home. That was the end of it, and made for Rome. And as this senator returned in glory, sailing in style, the laurel on his brow. He met a vessel, driving, says the story, with Constance, pale and piteous, at the prow. Nothing he knew of who she was, or how, brought down to such condition, nor would she tell, under threat of death, her history. He brought her back to Rome and to his wife. He gave her, with her little son, and so, safe at the senator's, she lived her life. Thus could Our Lady lift her out of woe, as she lifts many another here below. There for a season Constance had her place, and lived in holy works, her gift of grace. This senator's wife, it happened, was her aunt, but for all that she did not yet discern, her Nizza, long lost, in Constance. But I shan't delay my story longer, I return to Allah. Long he felt his spirit yearn, and wept for Constance, who, for all his weeping, was safe enough in Rome and in good keeping. King Allah, who had doomed his mother's death, one day was taken with a great remorse, and, to relate the matter in a breath, set sail to Rome for whatsoever course of penance that the Pope might there enforce, little or great, and as he sailed besought Christ to forgive the evils he had wrought. The news at once was bandied through the town. Allah the King has come on pilgrimage. His harbingers were going up and down, and, by a custom common in that age, the senator and all his lineage rode out as much to show magnificence as to receive a king with reverence. Splendid the welcome that these noblemen gave to King Allah. He, no less than due, did honour to him in return, and then, after their meeting in a day or two, King Allah bade the senator renew their meeting at a feast, and, truth to tell, the little son of Constance came as well. Some say it was at Constance's request. The little child was taken to this feast. I can't know everything, I do my best, but be that as it may, I know at least that he was there and, by her wish, released, to stand in front of Allah after grace. The child stood looking at the kingly face. Seeing the child, the king began to ponder, and made remark a little later on, "Who is that pretty infant standing yonder?" The senator said, "By God and by St. John, he has a mother, but his father's gone. For all I know," he went on to expound, "the circumstance in which the child was found, God knows." He then proceeded to declare, "I never saw or heard in all my life of such a virtuous woman anywhere as that boy's mother, woman, maid, or wife. And I'll be bound she'd rather have a knife thrust through her very heart than be impure. No one could egg her onto that for sure." In this child's face there was as great resemblance to Constance as there possibly could be, and Allah bearing ever in remembrance the beauty of his wife, bemusedly thought, "Could the mother of the child be she, that once I had to wife?" And in his heart he sighed and sought occasion to depart, thinking, "O heaven, what phantoms in my head! I should believe, unless all judgment spent, the seas have swallowed her, and she is dead." And then there came the further argument, "How do I know that Christ may not have sent my Constance hither safe, as once before he sent her safely to my northern shore?" So, in the afternoon, the wondering king went with the senator upon the chance. He took him home with honour, and made them bring Constance in haste. He bade her to advance. You may believe she had no thought to dance, when told the reason, whom she was to meet. Faith, she could barely stand upon her feet. When Allah saw his wife, he greeted her, and wept. It was a moving thing to see that first long look of recognition stir upon his face. He knew that it was she, and she stood dumb in sorrow, like a tree. Her heart was shut within its own distress, when she remembered his unnaturalness, and twice she fell before him in a faint. He wept and sought her pardon with the cry, as God above and every shining saint may show me mercy, dear, it was not I, who am as guiltless of the griefs that lie on you as little Maurice here, whose look is so like yours, or blot me from God's book. Long was the sobbing, bitter was the pain, before their troubled spirits came to peace, and sad it was to hear them weep again, as if their weeping brought them an increase of sorrow, and I beg you to release me, for the task would take me till tomorrow, and I am weary now of so much sorrow. But finally, when all the truth was told, and when she knew him guiltless of her woes, their kisses fell, I think, 100-fold, and such delight, such rapture then arose, save for the joys eternal, I suppose. Such joy as theirs has never been surpassed, nor ever will be while the world may last. Then, to repay her for her griefs, she pressed humbly upon her husband to agree in sending a particular request, to beg her father of his majesty to do him so much honour as to be his guest one day at dinner, but to say nothing at all of her in any way. Some men would have it that he sent his son, their little Maurice, to the emperor. But, as I think, King Allah was not one to send a child as his ambassador to greet the flower of Christian men who bore so sovereign an authority. I deem he went himself, and so it well may seem. The emperor vouchsafed with courtesy to come and dine with him as he besought. I read he gazed at Maurice eagerly, and Constance came at once into his thought. Allah returned once more, and, as he ought, made ready for the feast, and all his power was spent in preparation for the hour. The morning came, King Allah and his queen rose early and arrayed themselves to meet the emperor. They were of joyful mien, and when she saw her father in the street, she lighted down and, falling at his feet, said, "Father, Constance was your child. O sir, have you no thought or memory of her? I am your daughter Constance," then said she, "that once you sent to Syria as to slaughter, and it is I that on the salty sea was thrust alone to perish on the water. Now, father dear, have mercy on your daughter. Send me no more to lands in heathen blindness, but thank my husband here for all his kindness." Who could describe the joys that seemed to rend the hearts of all those three at such a meeting? But I must bring my story to an end, and shall delay no more, the day is fleeting. They then sat down to dine. I leave the meeting, these happy people, in their joyfulness, greater 1,000 times than you can guess. Maurice in time became the emperor, crowned by the Pope, and proved a very limb of Christ, and lived to strive in honour for his holy church. My memories are dim. This is a tale of Constance, not of him. In ancient Roman histories you'll find the life of Maurice. I have it not in mind. His purpose ended, Allah chose the day to bring his sweet and saintly wife and boy to England, and they took the shortest way, and there they lived in quietude and joy. Not long it lasted, time, that can destroy. All happiness on earth will never bide. From day to night joy changes as the tide. Whoever lived so happy for a day as to have been unmoved by any sense of guilt or rage, unvexed by some affray, by pride or envy, passion or offence? And this I only say as evidence, that our felicities are of short life, and so it was with Allah and his wife. For death, that takes a rent from high and low, after a year had passed, or even less, called for this king, and Allah had to go. He left his Constance full of heaviness. God send a blessing on his soul, and bless the Lady Constance, who returning home set sail on her last journey back to Rome. To Rome she came, this holy soul, at last, and found her friends again at home, and well. All her adventures now were safely past. She found her father in the citadel, and weeping tears of tenderness, she fell, joyfully on her knees, pouring her praises, in thanks to God, 1,000 eager phrases. And so they lived in virtue, and the giving of holy alms never again to wend, until by death divided from the living. And so farewell, my tale is at an end. May Jesus Christ, who in his might can send joy after sorrow, keep us in his grace, aye, every man and woman in this place. Amen. Epilogue to the Man of Law's tale. Our host, after the man of law had done, rose in his stirrups. Listen, everyone. Good value, that, he said, to say the least. A thrifty tale. God's bones, Sir Parish Priest. Tell us a tale. You promised it before. You learned men are full of ancient lore. God's dignity. You know a lot, I see. The parson answered, Benedicti. What ails the man so sinfully to swear? Our host retorted, Ho, is Johnny there? I smell a lollard in the wind, said he. Good men, our host went on, attend to me. Don't run away. By Jesu's noble passion, we're in for something done in sermon fashion. This lollard here would like to preach, that's what. The skipper said, By thunder, he shall not. He shan't come here to vex us with this preaching, his commentaries and his gospel teaching. We all believe in God round here, said he, and he'll go starting up some heresy, and sow his tares in our clean corn, perchance. And therefore, host, I warn you in advance, this little body has a tale to tell, that ought to set you ringing like a bell. I shall be waking up the company. It won't be much about philosophy, or physlias, or curious terms in law. There is but little Latin in my maw.